Kim Jong Un is going to die, and when he does, the most powerful people in North Korea are going to face a nightmare they can't escape. The generals who run the country, who control the military, who have everything right now, are about to lose it all in the most brutal way possible. Before we begin, take a moment to like the video and subscribe if you're grateful you don't live under a dictatorship. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Right now, Kim Jong Un controls North Korea with absolute power. He's the supreme leader. Everything goes through him. But he's not immortal. He's in his late 30s, he's overweight, he smokes heavily, he drinks, and his family has a history of dying young. His father died at 69, his grandfather died at 82. But Kim Jong Il had a stroke at 62 and spent years in declining health before he finally died. Kim Jong Un could die tomorrow. He could die in 10 years. He could die in 30 years. Nobody knows. But when he does die, North Korea is going to face the most dangerous transition of power in its history. And the people who are going to suffer the most are the very people who seem the most powerful right now: the generals, the military leaders, the people who run the army, the secret police, the weapons programs. You'd think these guys would be safe. You'd think they'd be the ones fighting for control. You'd think they'd be the ones who'd come out on top. But here's the thing. In North Korea, being powerful makes you a target. And when Kim Jong Un dies, every single one of those generals is going to be looking over their shoulder, wondering if they're next. Let me explain why this is such a massive problem. North Korea isn't like other countries. It's not a normal dictatorship where the military just takes over when the leader dies. It's a hereditary dictatorship, a dynasty. The Kim family has ruled North Korea since it was founded in 1948. Kim Il-sung, the founder, ruled until he died in 1994. Then his son, Kim Jong Il, took over and ruled until he died in 2011. Then his son, Kim Jong Un, took over, and he's been ruling ever since. 3 generations, 3 Kims. And the entire system, the entire country, is built around worshiping the Kim family as gods. Not metaphorically, literally. They teach children in schools that Kim Il-sung is immortal, that he's still watching over the country even though he's dead. They have a religion built around the Kim family called Juche. So when Kim Jong Un dies, the system demands that another Kim takes over. But here's the problem. Kim Jong Un doesn't have an adult heir. He has kids, but they're young. His oldest child is maybe 10 or 11 years old, way too young to rule a country, way too young to command a military, way too young to make life and death decisions. So what happens when the leader dies and there's no clear successor? Chaos, power struggles, infighting. And in a country like North Korea, where everyone has guns and missiles and chemical weapons, that chaos could get really bad really fast. And the generals are right in the middle of it, because they're the ones with the power to actually do something. They control the military, they control the weapons, they control the ability to enforce order or create chaos. But that power makes them dangerous. To each other, to whoever tries to take control, to everyone. To understand why the generals are in trouble, you need to understand how power works in North Korea. It's not like a normal military dictatorship where the generals run everything. It's more complicated than that. At the top, you have Kim Jong Un. He has absolute power. He can order anyone killed. He can promote anyone. He can demote anyone. He can change any policy. He doesn't answer to anyone. There's no Congress, no parliament, no courts that can overrule him. He's it. Below him, you have several layers of power. The most important is the Workers' Party of Korea. That's the political party that officially runs the country. Kim Jong Un is the chairman of the party, and the party has a central committee, a politburo, and various departments that handle different aspects of running the country. Then you have the military, the Korean People's Army. It's massive. North Korea has over 1 million active soldiers and several million more in reserves. The military is divided into different branches: the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Strategic Rocket Forces, which handle the missiles, and the Special Forces. Then you have the Secret Police, the Ministry of State Security. These are the guys who spy on everyone, who run the prison camps, who arrest people for disloyalty. They're terrifying, and they're incredibly powerful. And finally, you have the various government ministries that handle things like the economy, foreign affairs, agriculture, and so on. All of these institutions have leaders, and those leaders are the elite, the people with power and privilege, the generals, the party officials, the secret police chiefs. These are the people who live in Pyongyang, the capital, where life is relatively good. They have nice apartments, they have access to imported goods, they have cars, they have some freedoms that ordinary North Koreans don't have. But here's the catch. All of that power and privilege comes from Kim Jong Un. He's the one who appoints them. He's the one who can fire them. He's the one who decides if they live or die. And Kim Jong Un has shown repeatedly that he's willing to kill anyone he sees as a threat, even family members. In 2013, he had his uncle, Jang Song-taek, executed. Jang was one of the most powerful men in North Korea. He was married to Kim Jong-un's aunt. He was a mentor to Kim Jong-un. He helped him consolidate power when he first took over. But then Kim Jong-un decided Jang was too powerful, too ambitious. So he had him arrested, put on trial, and executed. And not just executed, purged. His entire network of allies was rounded up and killed or sent to prison camps. In 2017, Kim Jong-un had his half-brother, Kim Jong-nam, assassinated. Kim Jong-nam was living in exile in Macau. He wasn't a threat. He had no interest in politics, but Kim Jong-un saw him as a potential rival, someone that foreign powers could try to install as a puppet leader. So he ordered North Korean agents to kill him. They did it in broad daylight in an airport in Malaysia using a banned chemical weapon. If Kim Jong-un is willing to kill his own uncle and his own half-brother, what do you think he'd do to a general who got too ambitious? What do you think he'd do to a military leader who tried to build a power base? What do you think he'd do to anyone he saw as a potential threat? He'd kill them without hesitation. So the generals, as powerful as they are, live in constant fear. They know that one wrong move, one hint of disloyalty, one moment of looking too ambitious, and they're dead. Their families are dead. Their friends are dead. Everyone connected to them is dead. That's how power works in North Korea. It's not about who has the biggest army or the most guns. It's about who Kim Jong-un trusts. And trust is a very fragile thing. Now let's talk about what happens when a dictator dies, because history gives us some clues about what might happen in North Korea. When Kim Il-sung died in 1994, there was a succession plan in place. His son, Kim Jong Il, had been groomed for power for decades. He'd been given important positions in the party and the government. He'd built his own power base. He'd proven himself loyal and capable. So when Kim Il-sung died, Kim Jong-il took over smoothly. There were no power struggles, no coups, no chaos. When Kim Jong-il died in 2011, there was also a succession plan. Kim Jong-un had been chosen as the heir a few years earlier. He'd been given military ranks and positions. He'd been introduced to the country as the next leader. And when Kim Jong-il died, Kim Jong-un took over. There was some uncertainty at first. Some people wondered if he was too young, too inexperienced. But he moved quickly to consolidate power. He purged potential rivals. He promoted loyalists. He showed that he was in charge. And the transition, while not perfect, was relatively smooth. But when Kim Jong-un dies, there's no clear succession plan, at least not one that we know of. His kids are too young. He doesn't have brothers who could take over. His sister, Kim Yo-jong, is powerful, but it's unclear if the military and the party would accept a female leader in a deeply patriarchal society. So, what happens? Well, let's look at other countries where dictators died without a clear successor. When Stalin died in 1953, the Soviet Union went through a brutal power struggle. Different factions fought for control. Lavrentiy Beria, the head of the secret police, tried to seize power. He was arrested and executed. Nikita Khrushchev eventually came out on top, but it took years of backstabbing and political maneuvering. When Mao Zedong died in 1976, China went through a similar struggle. Mao's wife and her allies, known as the Gang of Four, tried to take control. They were arrested within weeks of Mao's death. Deng Xiaoping eventually emerged as the leader, but again, it took time and there was a lot of uncertainty. When Tito died in 1980, Yugoslavia started falling apart. Tito had held the country together through force of personality and careful balancing of different ethnic groups. When he died, those ethnic tensions exploded. It took a decade, but eventually Yugoslavia broke apart in a series of brutal civil wars. The pattern is clear. When a strong man dies without a clear successor, there's chaos. Different factions fight for power. Old rivalries resurface. People who were kept in line by fear of the dictator suddenly feel free to act. And the result is often violence, purges, and instability. North Korea is going to go through the same thing, maybe worse, because North Korea is more isolated, more militarized, and more paranoid than any of those other countries were. So let's get specific about the generals. Why are they in such a bad position? On the surface, it seems like they should be fine. They control the military. They have guns, tanks, missiles, and nukes. They have the ability to enforce their will. If there's a power struggle, you'd think they'd be the ones with the advantage. But it's not that simple, because the generals aren't a unified group. They don't all work together. They don't all trust each other. And they have very different interests. Some generals are loyalists. They genuinely believe in the Kim regime. They've been promoted because they're fanatically loyal. They'd die for Kim Jong Un. And when he dies, they're going to want to preserve the system. They're going to want to find another Kim to lead the country. Other generals are pragmatists. They don't necessarily love the Kim regime, but they benefit from it. They have power, privilege, and wealth because of the current system. They want to preserve that, but they're also smart enough to know that the system might need to change, that North Korea might need to open up, to reform, to modernize. And they're willing to consider alternatives to the Kim dynasty if it means preserving their own power. And then there are the ambitious generals, the ones who've always wanted more power, the ones who've been held back by Kim Jong Un, the ones who think they could do a better job running the country. These are the dangerous ones, because they're going to see Kim Jong Un's death as an opportunity. When Stalin died in 1953, the Soviet Union went through a brutal power struggle. Different factions fought for control. Lavrentiy Beria, the head of the secret police, tried to seize power. He was arrested and executed. Nikita Khrushchev eventually came out on top, but it took years of backstabbing and political maneuvering. When Mao Zedong died in 1976, China went through a similar struggle. Mao's wife and her allies, known as the Gang of Four, tried to take control. They were arrested within weeks of Mao's death. Deng Xiaoping eventually emerged as the leader, but again, it took time and there was a lot of uncertainty. When Tito died in 1980, Yugoslavia started falling apart. Tito had held the country together through force of personality and careful balancing of different ethnic groups. When he died, those ethnic tensions exploded. It took a decade, but eventually Yugoslavia broke apart in a series of brutal civil wars. The pattern is clear. When a strong man dies without a clear successor, there's chaos. Different factions fight for power. Old rivalries resurface. People who were kept in line by fear of the dictator suddenly feel free to act. And the result is often violence, purges, and instability. North Korea is going to go through the same thing, maybe worse, because North Korea is more isolated, more militarized, and more paranoid than any of those other countries were. Now let's talk about another factor that makes the general's situation even worse: the secret police. North Korea's Ministry of State Security is one of the most brutal intelligence agencies in the world. They spy on everyone. They have informants everywhere. They listen to phone calls. They read letters. They watch who you talk to, who you associate with, what you say in private. And they report directly to Kim Jong Un. The secret police exist to prevent exactly the kind of power struggle we're talking about. They exist to catch conspiracies before they happen, to identify potential threats, to eliminate rivals before they become dangerous. And they're very good at their job. Over the years, the secret police have infiltrated every institution in North Korea: the military, the party, the government, even their own organization. They have agents everywhere, and those agents are watching the generals. So if a general starts to act suspiciously, if he starts meeting with other generals more often, if he starts moving troops around, if he starts stockpiling resources, the secret police are going to notice, and they're going to report it. While Kim Jong Un's alive, that system keeps the generals in check. They can't conspire against him because the secret police will find out, and they'll be arrested before they can act. But when Kim Jong Un dies, that system breaks down. Because who do the secret police report to now? Who's in charge? The head of the Ministry of State Security is going to be in a very powerful position. He's going to have information on everyone. He's going to know who's loyal and who's not. He's going to know who's planning what, and he's going to be able to use that information to his advantage. But he's also going to be a target, because everyone knows how much power he has. The generals are going to see him as a threat. The party officials are going to see him as a threat. Everyone is going to want to either co-opt him or eliminate him. So the head of the secret police is going to be in the same position as the generals. He has power, but that power makes him a target, and he's going to have to choose sides very quickly. And the same goes for all the other secret police officers. They're going to have to decide who to be loyal to: the system they've been serving, the next Kim leader, one of the generals, themselves. And once the secret police start splitting into factions, the whole system of control breaks down, because now the generals don't just have to worry about other generals. They have to worry about secret police officers who might be working for their rivals. They have to worry about their own bodyguards, their own aides, their own family members. Paranoia is going to run rampant, and in that kind of environment, people die. A lot of people. There's another factor that makes this whole situation even more terrifying. North Korea has nuclear weapons. Estimates vary, but most experts think North Korea has somewhere between 30 and 60 nuclear warheads. They have missiles that can reach South Korea, Japan, and possibly even the United States. They have chemical weapons. They have biological weapons. They have one of the largest artillery forces in the world, with thousands of guns aimed at Seoul. In other words, North Korea has the ability to kill millions of people. And all of those weapons are under the control of the military, specifically under the control of the generals. So what happens to those weapons when Kim Jong Un dies and the generals start fighting each other? This is the nightmare scenario that keeps US and South Korean military planners awake at night. If there's a power struggle in North Korea, if different factions of the military start fighting for control, what happens to the nukes? Does one faction try to use them as leverage? Does someone threaten to launch them if they don't get their way? Does a desperate general decide that if he's going down, he's taking everyone else with him? Or does someone lose control of the weapons entirely? Does a rogue unit steal a warhead? Does a missile base fall into the hands of extremists who decide to launch an attack just to create chaos? These aren't far-fetched scenarios, they're real possibilities. And they're the reason why the international community is so concerned about stability in North Korea. The US, South Korea, China, Japan, Russia, everyone has an interest in making sure that North Korea doesn't collapse into chaos. Because if it does, those nuclear weapons could end up anywhere, in the hands of anyone. And for the generals, this creates another problem. Because they're the ones responsible for those weapons. They're the ones who have the launch codes. They're the ones who control the missile bases and the nuclear facilities. So if something goes wrong, if a weapon goes missing, if there's an accidental launch, if someone does something stupid, the generals are the ones who are going to be held responsible. By whoever comes to power, by the international community, by history. And that's yet another reason why being a general in North Korea is going to be a nightmare when Kim Jong Un dies. The responsibility, the pressure, the stakes are all unimaginably high. We can't talk about North Korea's future without talking about China, because China has a huge interest in what happens when Kim Jong Un dies. North Korea and China share a border, a long border, over 800 miles of it, and China does not want chaos on its border. It doesn't want refugees flooding across. It doesn't want a civil war spilling over. It doesn't want US troops advancing toward Chinese territory. And it definitely doesn't want nuclear weapons falling into the wrong hands. So China has been propping up North Korea for decades. They provide food aid, energy aid. They buy North Korean exports. They give the regime diplomatic support at the United Nations. They do all of this not because they love the Kim regime, but because they see North Korea as a buffer state, a barrier between them and South Korea, which hosts American troops. But when Kim Jong Un dies, China is going to face a difficult choice. Do they support whoever takes power in North Korea, even if it's someone unstable or incompetent? Do they try to install their own puppet leader? Do they intervene militarily to prevent chaos? Each of those options has serious risks. If China supports a weak or unstable leader, they might end up with a North Korea that's even more unpredictable and dangerous than it is now. If they try to install a puppet, they risk a backlash from North Korean nationalists who don't want to be controlled by China. And they risk a confrontation with other factions who have different ideas about who should lead. If they intervene militarily, they risk a broader conflict. South Korea and the US might see Chinese troops in North Korea as a threat and respond accordingly. And China doesn't want to fight a war over North Korea. So China is going to try to manage the transition. They're going to try to work behind the scenes to ensure that whoever takes power in North Korea is someone they can work with, someone stable, someone who won't cause problems. And that means China is going to be putting pressure on the North Korean generals. They're going to be making it clear that certain options are acceptable and others aren't. They're going to be offering support to some factions and threatening others. For the generals, this creates yet another complication. Because now they're not just dealing with internal North Korean politics, they're dealing with pressure from China. And China is a superpower with enormous leverage over North Korea. If a general tries to seize power and China doesn't approve, China could cut off food supplies, cut off energy, close the border, sanction North Korean trade, make life very difficult. So the generals have to factor in what China wants. They have to think about whether Beijing will support their bid for power. And that gives China enormous influence over what happens next. But it also means the generals are caught between competing pressures. What China wants might not be what the North Korean people want. What China wants might not be what the military wants. What China wants might not be what's best for the generals themselves. And trying to balance all of those competing interests while also fighting for survival in a power struggle is nearly impossible. Here's something else that's going to make the generals' lives miserable when Kim Jong Un dies. North Korea's economy is a disaster, and it's getting worse. North Korea is one of the poorest countries in the world. The average North Korean earns maybe $1,000 to $2,000 a year. Most people don't have reliable electricity. Food is scarce. Medicine is scarce. Basic necessities are scarce. The economy has been in decline for decades. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 was a huge blow because North Korea lost its biggest trading partner and source of aid. The famine in the 1990s killed hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people. Things improved a little in the 2000s, but not by much. And then the international sanctions started piling up. The UN, the US, the EU, they all imposed sanctions on North Korea because of its nuclear weapons program. Those sanctions have crippled the economy even further. Kim Jong Un has tried to develop the economy. He's allowed some market activity. He's tried to attract foreign investment. He's built some showcase projects in Pyongyang to make the country look more modern, but it's not enough. The economy is still struggling, and when Kim Jong Un dies, the economic situation is going to get even worse. Because during a power struggle, nobody's going to be focused on the economy. Nobody's going to be thinking about feeding the people or keeping the lights on. They're going to be thinking about survival. Trade is going to decline. What little international engagement North Korea has is going to dry up. China might reduce aid if they're uncertain about who's in charge. The black markets that have kept many North Koreans alive are going to be disrupted. And when people are hungry, when they're desperate, they get angry. They start to question the system. They start to cause problems. The generals are going to have to deal with that. They're going to have to figure out how to keep the population under control while also fighting each other for power. And that's really hard to do. If the economy collapses completely, if people start starving en masse, the generals might face protests, riots, maybe even an uprising. And if that happens, they're going to have to decide whether to use force to put it down or to try to address people's legitimate grievances. Using force might work in the short term, but it risks turning the entire population against whoever's in charge. And it risks creating martyrs, heroes, who died fighting the regime, which could inspire more resistance. Trying to address grievances means opening up the system, allowing more freedom, maybe even considering reforms. But that's incredibly risky in a power struggle, because it could be seen as weakness, and weakness gets you killed. So the generals are stuck. They can't ignore the economic crisis, but they can't really fix it either, not while they're fighting for their lives. There's another factor that's going to complicate the succession: a generational divide in the North Korean elite. The older generation of generals and officials, the ones in their 60s and 70s, grew up during the Kim Il-sung era. They remember the Korean War. They remember when North Korea was actually doing better economically than South Korea back in the 1960s and 70s. They're true believers in the system. They're ideologically committed to the Kim regime and to the idea of Juche, North Korea's official ideology of self-reliance. The younger generation, the ones in their 40s and 50s, grew up during the Kim Jong Il era. They saw the famines of the 1990s. They saw the economy collapse. They've seen how far North Korea has fallen behind South Korea and the rest of the world. Many of them have been exposed to outside information, foreign movies, foreign culture, through smuggled DVDs and USB drives. They're more pragmatic, they're less ideological, and they're more willing to consider that maybe the system needs to change. Kim Jong Un himself is part of this younger generation. He was educated in Switzerland. He knows what the outside world is like, and he's tried to modernize North Korea in certain ways, even while maintaining the brutal dictatorship. But when he dies, the generational divide is going to become a fault line. The older generals are going to want to preserve the system exactly as it is. They're going to want to find another Kim to worship. They're going to resist any change. The younger generals are going to push for reform. Maybe not democracy, but at least economic opening. Maybe following the Chinese model, where you have authoritarian political control but allow some market activity and foreign investment. These two groups are going to clash, and the result could be a generational war within the elite. Old guard versus new guard, conservatives versus reformers, ideologues versus pragmatists. And this divide is going to make it even harder to build a coalition, because it's not just about personal ambition or factional loyalty. It's about fundamental disagreements over what North Korea should be. The older generals are going to see the younger ones as traitors who want to sell out the revolution. The younger generals are going to see the older ones as dinosaurs who are stuck in the past and will doom North Korea to perpetual poverty and isolation. And neither side is going to back down easily. Here's something else the generals have to worry about. North Korea runs a system of political prison camps that holds somewhere between 80,000 and 120,000 people. These camps are where the regime sends anyone deemed disloyal, political prisoners, people who criticized the government, people who tried to escape, people whose only crime was being related to someone who did something wrong. The conditions in these camps are horrific. Forced labor, starvation, torture, summary executions. Entire families are imprisoned together because North Korea practices guilt by association. If you commit a political crime, your parents, your siblings, even your children can be sent to the camps. Many of the people in these camps are from elite families, families of generals, party officials, and government ministers who fell out of favor. When someone is purged, their entire family often goes to the camps. So there are thousands of people in those camps who have personal grudges against the current regime. People who've lost everything. People who've seen their families destroyed. People who would love nothing more than to see the system collapse and the people who put them there punished. When Kim Jong Un dies and the system becomes unstable, what happens to those camps? Do the guards stay loyal to whoever takes power, or do they abandon their posts? Do the prisoners riot? Do they escape? And if they escape, what do? Do they seek revenge? Do they join whatever opposition movement emerges? Do they start sharing their stories with the world, exposing the horrors of the camps? For the generals, this is another nightmare scenario, because many of them were involved in sending people to those camps. They signed the orders. They carried out the purges. They're complicit in the atrocities. If those prisoners get free, if they start talking, if they start naming names, the generals could face justice. Maybe not immediately, but eventually. If North Korea ever transitions to a different system, if there's ever any kind of accountability, the generals who ran the camps are going to be held responsible. And even in the short term, escaped prisoners could create chaos. They could join resistance movements. They could provide intelligence to foreign governments. They could become a rallying point for opposition. So the generals have to worry about controlling the camps, making sure the guards stay loyal, making sure the prisoners don't escape. And that's yet another thing they have to manage while also fighting for power. Let's talk about something that might surprise you. For all the parades and displays of military might, North Korea's military is actually in pretty rough shape. Yes, they have over 1 million soldiers. Yes, they have thousands of artillery pieces. Yes, they have nuclear weapons. But a lot of their equipment is old, really old. Soviet-era tanks from the 1960s, fighter jets from the 1970s, ships that barely work. The soldiers are poorly fed. Many of them are malnourished. They're poorly trained, because North Korea can't afford to do large-scale military exercises, which require fuel and ammunition. And morale is low, because soldiers know they're not getting paid well, and their families back home are struggling. The only parts of the military that are well-maintained are the units that matter most to the regime, the units stationed near Pyongyang, the missile forces, the special forces, the palace guard. These units get the best equipment, the best training, the best food, because these are the units that protect the regime. But the vast majority of the military is in much worse shape. And when Kim Jong Un dies, that's going to matter. Because if there's a power struggle, if different generals try to use military force to seize control, they're going to find that their troops might not be as effective as they look on paper. A general who commands a tank division might discover that half his tanks don't work. A general who commands an infantry division might find that his soldiers are too weak from malnutrition to march long distances. A general who commands an air force might find that his planes can't fly because there's no fuel. So, military power in North Korea is not evenly distributed. It's concentrated in certain elite units. And the generals who control those units are going to have a huge advantage in any power struggle. Which means the generals who don't control those units are in trouble. They might have fancy titles and high ranks, but if they don't have effective military force behind them, they're vulnerable. And that creates even more paranoia and fear, because generals are going to be looking at each other, trying to figure out who actually has real power and who's just bluffing. We need to talk about Kim Yo-jong, Kim Jong Un's younger sister, because she's one of the most powerful people in North Korea right now, and she could play a huge role in whatever happens next. Kim Yo-jong has been gaining prominence over the past few years. She's been given important positions in the party. She's accompanied Kim Jong Un to international summits. She's delivered messages on his behalf. She's been involved in major policy decisions. Some analysts think Kim Jong Un has been grooming her as a potential successor, or at least as a regent who could rule on behalf of his children until they're old enough to take over. But there's a problem. North Korea is a deeply patriarchal society. Women have very limited roles in politics and the military. The idea of a woman leading the country would be revolutionary, and revolutions are dangerous. Some of the older, more conservative generals and officials might refuse to accept Kim Yo-jong as leader. They might see it as a violation of tradition. They might see it as weakness, and they might use that as an excuse to seize power themselves. On the other hand, Kim Yo-jong has advantages. She's a Kim. She has the legitimacy of the bloodline. She's been visible and active in the regime. She's proven herself capable. And she has supporters among the younger generation of officials who are more open to the idea. If Kim Yo-jong makes a bid for power after her brother dies, it's going to split the elite. Some will support her, others will oppose her, and the generals are going to have to choose sides. The ones who support her are going to face accusations of betraying tradition and weakening the country. The ones who oppose her are going to face accusations of disloyalty to the Kim family. Either way, they're taking a risk. And in North Korea, taking risks gets you killed. There's another possibility. Kim Yo-jong might try to install herself as a regent, ruling on behalf of Kim Jong-un's children until they're old enough to take over. This would preserve the dynasty while also giving her real power. But that's also risky, because regencies are unstable. The regent has power, but it's always temporary. It's always contested, and people are always plotting to either overthrow the regent or manipulate them. If Kim Yo-jong becomes regent, the generals are going to try to control her. They're going to try to become her closest advisors, the people who really run things behind the scenes. And that's going to lead to competition, backstabbing, and conflict among the generals as they fight for her favor. So whether Kim Yo-jong tries to rule directly or through a regency, her presence is going to complicate the power struggle, and the generals are going to have to navigate that very carefully. Some people think that when Kim Jong Un dies, North Korea might actually reform, open up, join the international community, maybe even reunify with South Korea. It's a nice idea, but it's probably not realistic. Reform in North Korea would require the elite to give up power. The generals would have to give up their privileges. The party officials would have to give up their control. The secret police would have to give up their ability to terrorize the population. And why would they do that? They benefit enormously from the current system. Yes, the country is poor. Yes, it's isolated. But the elite live well. They have power, wealth, and status. They have every incentive to preserve the system, not change it. Opening up to the outside world would also threaten the regime, because once people start seeing how much better life is in other countries, they're going to demand change. They're going to question why they have to live in poverty while South Koreans are rich. They're going to question why they have to worship the Kim family. The regime's survival depends on information control, on keeping people ignorant of the outside world, on convincing them that North Korea is a paradise and everywhere else is a hellhole. If that information control breaks down, the whole system could collapse, and the elite know that. So reform is dangerous. It threatens everything they've built. That said, there might be some pragmatists among the generals who think limited reform is necessary. Not political reform, but economic reform, opening up to trade, allowing foreign investment, following the Chinese model. These pragmatists would argue that North Korea needs to develop its economy, or it's going to collapse anyway, that the sanctions are crippling, that the country can't survive on its own, that some change is necessary. But even this limited reform would be controversial. The hardliners would see it as betrayal, as selling out, as the first step toward the regime's collapse. And that divide between pragmatists who want limited reform and hardliners who want to preserve the status quo is going to be another source of conflict among the generals. So let's imagine what actually happens when Kim Jong Un dies. Let's walk through the likely scenario. It probably starts with an announcement. Kim Jong Un has died. The cause of death might be announced, or it might be kept secret. There will be a period of national mourning, crying, wailing, displays of grief, whether genuine or performed out of fear. And then the question, who's in charge now? If there's a clear succession plan, if Kim Jong Un has named an heir and made it known to the elite, things might go smoothly. The heir takes over. The generals pledge loyalty. Life continues. But if there's no clear plan, if the heir is too young, or if there are multiple potential successors, that's when the crisis begins. The party will probably try to establish a collective leadership, a council of senior officials and generals who rule together temporarily. They'll claim they're preserving stability, honoring Kim Jong-un's legacy, guiding the country through this difficult transition. But behind the scenes, everyone on that council is going to be maneuvering for position, building alliances, making promises, threatening rivals. Some generals will try to consolidate control over key military units. They'll move troops, replace commanders with loyalists, secure weapons and strategic locations. The secret police will be watching all of this, reporting on who's doing what. And their reports will be used by different factions to accuse each other of disloyalty. Kim Yo-jong, if she's still alive and in a position of power, will probably make a move. She'll either claim leadership for herself or announce that she's acting as regent for her nephew. And she'll demand loyalty from the military and the party. Some will pledge loyalty, others will hesitate, and some will openly oppose her. That's when things start to get violent. The first purge will probably happen within weeks of Kim Jong-un's death. Someone, somewhere, is going to be accused of plotting a coup. Whether it's true or not doesn't matter. The accusation is enough. That person will be arrested, maybe executed, maybe just removed from power. And their allies will be targeted too. This will create fear. The other generals will realize that the purges have started, that they could be next. And they'll have to decide, do they go along with whoever's doing the purging, hoping to survive, or do they fight back? Some will fight back. They'll use their military units to resist. They'll refuse to hand over power. They'll barricade themselves in their bases and dare anyone to come after them. And that's when North Korea could descend into civil war. Not a full-scale war with armies marching across the country, but a low-level conflict. Different factions controlling different parts of the military, skirmishes, assassinations, coups and counter-coups. The capital, Pyongyang, will probably stay under control of whoever can secure the loyalty of the units stationed there. But out in the provinces, local commanders might declare independence, or pledge loyalty to different factions, or just try to survive by keeping their heads down. China will be watching all of this with alarm. If things get too chaotic, if it looks like the country is about to collapse, China might intervene. They might send troops across the border to secure key locations, to prevent refugees from flooding into China, to make sure the nuclear weapons don't fall into the wrong hands. The US and South Korea will also be on high alert. They'll be monitoring the situation closely, moving forces into position, preparing for any scenario, from a North Korean collapse to an accidental or intentional attack. And through all of this, the North Korean people will be suffering. Food supplies will be disrupted. Electricity will be even more unreliable than usual. The economy will tank. And they'll have no idea what's happening because the state media will be broadcasting propaganda claiming everything is fine. The generals, meanwhile, will be in a living nightmare, every day wondering if they're going to be purged. Every decision a potential death sentence. Every ally a potential traitor. Some will try to flee. They'll grab what wealth they can and try to escape to China or Russia or wherever will take them. But most won't make it. The borders will be watched. The secret police will be hunting for defectors. And the punishment for trying to flee will be death. Others will try to wait it out. They'll keep their heads down, follow orders, hope that whoever wins will let them live. But in a power struggle this intense, neutrality is almost impossible. Eventually, everyone has to pick a side, and picking the wrong side means death. Eventually, someone will win. One faction will emerge on top. One person or one small group will consolidate enough power to claim leadership of North Korea. Maybe it's Kim Jong Il. Maybe it's a powerful general. Maybe it's a coalition of party officials. We don't know. It depends on too many variables. But whoever wins, they're going to have to deal with the losers. And in North Korea, there's only one way to deal with losers. You eliminate them. The winning faction will launch a massive purge. Everyone who opposed them will be arrested. Generals, party officials, secret police, anyone who posed a threat or who might pose a threat in the future. Some will be executed publicly to send a message. Others will be sent to the prison camps. A few might be allowed to retire quietly if they're not seen as too dangerous. And it won't just be the individuals. Their families will be targeted too, because North Korea practices guilt by association. If you're a traitor, your whole family is guilty. So hundreds, maybe thousands of people from elite families will be rounded up and punished. Families that have been powerful for generations will be destroyed overnight. The surviving generals will be terrified into submission. They'll pledge absolute loyalty to the new leader. They'll do whatever they're told, because they know that one wrong move and they're next. And North Korea will continue. The regime will survive. The dynasty might continue if Kim Jong Un's children eventually take power, or it might transform into a different kind of dictatorship, led by a general or a party official. But it will still be a dictatorship. It will still be brutal. It will still be isolated, because the people who come out on top will be the ones who are most ruthless, most paranoid, most willing to do whatever it takes to stay in power. And those aren't the qualities of people who reform. Those are the qualities of people who tighten control even further. So that's why the generals will suffer when Kim Jong Un dies, because they're in an impossible position. They have power, but that power makes them targets. They have influence, but that influence makes them suspects. They have weapons, but those weapons don't guarantee safety. In a normal country, when a leader dies, there's a system in place, a constitution, elections, a clear process for transferring power, and the military's job is to stay out of politics and protect the country. But North Korea isn't a normal country. It's a hereditary dictatorship built on fear, propaganda, and the worship of one family. And when that family line is threatened, when there's no clear heir, the whole system becomes unstable. The generals are going to be caught in the middle of that instability. They're going to be forced to make impossible choices. Support the wrong person and die. Support the right person and maybe survive, but at the cost of purging their friends and colleagues. Try to stay neutral and become a target for everyone. There's no good option, no safe path. Just survival, and the knowledge that survival might require doing terrible things. And even if they survive the initial power struggle, they're going to spend the rest of their lives looking over their shoulders, wondering if the new leader trusts them, wondering if they're next on the purge list, wondering if all the power and privilege they've accumulated is about to be taken away. That's the reality of being a general in a totalitarian dictatorship. You're powerful, but you're never safe. You're important, but you're expendable. You can give orders that affect millions of people, but you can't control your own fate. Kim Jong Un controls North Korea right now. He decides who lives and who dies. He decides who has power and who doesn't. He's the center of everything. But he's mortal. He's going to die. And when he does, the generals who seem so powerful right now are going to find out just how fragile their position really is. They're going to suffer. They're going to fight. They're going to purge and be purged. Some will survive. Most won't. And through it all, North Korea will remain what it's always been. A prison. A nightmare. A country where power corrupts absolutely, and where the price of failure is death. The generals know this. They've always known this. They've been part of this system their entire lives. They've carried out purges. They've sent people to prison camps. They've done terrible things in the name of loyalty to the Kim family. And now, when Kim Jong Un dies, they're going to reap what they've sown. The system they helped build and maintain is going to turn on them, and there will be no escape. That's the tragedy of North Korea, not just for the people who suffer under the regime, but for the people who run it. Because even at the top, even among the most powerful, there's no safety, no peace, no guarantee of survival, just fear, and the knowledge that one day everything you've built could come crashing down. And when it does, you won't be spared. Subscribe to see what happens when dictatorships finally collapse.